Today, we're here with Joe Renzulli, a renowned figure in gifted education and named among the 25 most influential psychologists in the world. He'll discuss the identification and development of creativity and giftedness and how we can apply gifted education strategies to improve the learning of all students. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about your Renzulli Learning.
Happy to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about our work.
Yeah, so I thought I would just dive right in because you are obviously a renowned expert on gifted education. And can you tell us exactly what is your definition of gifted?
Well, first of all, I think that one of the things that people need to understand at the very beginning of this is that there are two kinds of giftedness. I actually like to use the word as an adjective rather than a noun. Not he or she is gifted, but he or she is displaying or developing what I call gifted behaviors. Those are the people that make a difference in the world. Mm-hmm. The first type I call lesson learning or schoolhouse giftedness. And fortunately or unfortunately, it depends on the way that you interpret it. Sometimes that's what schools think about, that a child is a good lesson learner. The type of giftedness that I refer to as creative, productive giftedness is based on a definition that I developed in the 1970s and in an article called What Makes Giftedness? Re-Examining a Definition. It is best explained graphically. Think of three intersecting rings. A Venn diagram is what it's called. And the first ring is above average, but not necessarily superior ability. And I want to stop right at that point and say, I'm not just talking about ability to do good on tests. There are people that are very able in art, in music, in organizational skills. There's all kinds of abilities. The problem is they're not as easily or precisely measured in young people. And many young people have them, but don't develop them because we don't give them a chance to be creative and the other two rings. The second circle is creativity. And there are entire books written on the definition of creativity, the ability to identify problems, look at problems in new and different ways, the ability to be playful and experimental with your mind. What will happen if I put these two things together? Or what would happen if I make it bigger? We'll have Big Ben. If I make it smaller, I can wear it on my wrist. Those are the kinds of things that are related to the definitions of creativity. The third ring is what I define as task commitment. And task commitment, people often say, oh, you mean motivation. Well, not exactly. In psychology, we talk about motivation as a general term. You're motivated to be a good parent, a good member of your church, a good learner of spelling. And those are all good things. However, task commitment is taking that same energy and focusing on it something very specific, but not just lesson learning, but also the other two rings. It could be something in music, in composition. It could be something in the arts. It could be something in leadership. So there's all kinds of abilities. And no one ring makes giftedness. It is the three rings interacting together. I would not argue that some people are born with more cognitive ability, just like they're born taller or shorter and with different color eyes. Yes, fine. But whether or not we put those things to use, by their deeds ye shall know them, by the things that they do. So if we have a little first or second grader and that child writes a beautiful short story or a beautiful poem or solves a particular math problem that is well above their understanding of math for that age, then I can say that child is superior in creative writing for his or her age. And that's something we should work on to develop.
You said that no one's born gifted. So can any child form gifted abilities then, if with the right education or stimulation?
I think that some kids are born with more cognitive ability than others. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't make them gifted. It just means that we can hope that they will be better lesson learners. But if they don't have an ounce of creativity in them, because we never gave them the opportunity to write an original poem or an original song when they were 6 years old, they're going to lose that potential, because all we're looking at is how well they learn their ABCs and their 1, 2, 3s.
So if someone is born with a high IQ, like an IQ of 130 or above, is it possible that you can't be gifted
Sure.
based on your definition?
Absolutely possible. If you can't bring the other two rings together, then you could have an IQ of 160. And there's a tremendous amount of research on this, even the research of one of Terman's colleagues in the second volume of Conceptions of Genetic Studies of Giftedness by Catherine Cox Miles, where she studies people throughout the course of history using a technique called historiometry. And basically that's, what did Sir Francis Galton write when he was 12 years old? You can estimate someone's IQ that way. And he has, or she has many, many examples of people who are famous, world famous, that basically would not have made it with a 130 cutoff score. It prompted me to write an article a number of years ago, which was quite controversial. It's called, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Copernicus, we regret to inform you, ... Because he was, Copernicus is very famous, and,
Right.
and at the same time, he wasn't up on the IQ scale. So I think that IQ obviously is important, but it's not everything.
I mean, are some people just better at learning than others? Is that just, how do you become a gifted learner then? Is it just a natural aptitude, or is it really just, is it really how you're teaching them, the kind of method that you're using?
Absolutely, 100%. You know that most school experiences for most kids are memorization to pass the test. I'm not going to argue against the value of that. What I'm arguing for is that we provide, this leads us to question 4, what is learning? Providing them with learning opportunities where they have an opportunity to develop their creativity, to develop their task commitment. In the model that I've developed that parallels the 3-ring conception of model, it's called the enrichment triad model. I have 3 different kinds of enrichment that I recommend to develop their gifted behaviors. Type 1 enrichment is exposure of young people to issues, ideas, topics, names, dates, places, events that might not ordinarily be covered in the regular curriculum, or are only covered so that kids can memorize that information for a test. So a type 1 might be, again, to go back to our story writing, creative writing, of bringing in a local writer or a local poet or a local journalist, or bringing in a local cartoonist. And they might talk about, display how they come up with their ideas. And afterwards, we ask them some questions. Who is interested in this? Who would like to learn more about how to do it? And that's type 2 enrichment, various kinds of thinking skills that develop creativity, that develop analytical thinking, that develop evaluative thinking, all the kinds of things that you find in the thinking literature, such as Bloom's taxonomy. So now we have 3 hands go up about who wants to follow the poet. And we want that youngster or those youngsters to have some opportunity. So we're going to provide them with some different kinds of learning experience in poetry, just getting them a book of rhyming words, or having them go online to learn where you can find rhyming words if you want to write rhyming poetry. Teaching them other forms of poetry beyond rhyming poetry, because all poetry for little children is usually rhyming poetry. The most valuable thing for teaching type 2 enrichment is what I call how-to books. And in my lab at the University of Connecticut, I have a whole library of how-to books, and there's a how-to book on everything. Now our responsibility says, what can we do? Forget what their scores are. They want to be poets. They want to be young poets. They were so inspired by our speaker. So what can we do to develop that talent? And it might not be for a lifetime. 2 years later, they might say they want to be a doctor. So I think that what they've learned just by doing that is that they can muster the skills, they can get organized. Related to these skills are something that is called the soft skills these days, but they're becoming very popular, executive function skills.
What are the ways that you can, quote, test a child to see if they're qualify for the gifted learning school that you have here, for example?
Well, we certainly look at test scores. That's one of the things. However, we look at teacher ratings and we look at examples of work that young people have already done. In psychology today, that's called performance-based assessment. By their deeds, ye shall know them. Show me a little 5 or 4-year-old that's done some outstanding artwork or some outstanding cartooning, or even invented their own game.
When you're testing someone, for example, is it just commentary from a teacher or a student, or how do you test that person to know?
Over the years in my work, we've developed a large number of teacher rating scales. And what we've also developed is a number of things that I call not assessment of learning, but assessment for learning. The kinds of things that will tell me something about what you want to learn and how you want to learn it. They're called interestalizers. And what we do is we find out what a young person's area of interest is. Interest is what makes anybody that's famous famous. They didn't get there if they were not interested in filmmaking like Steven Spielberg as a very young child, or if they're not interested in science as Einstein was as a very young child. So I think that those are the kinds of things that oftentimes in our test prep oriented society, we say we don't have time to do that. We really, my principal is going to evaluate me as a teacher by how much your scores improve on the California Achievement Test or the Connecticut State Mastery Test. And I think that, again, I'm not saying those things are bad, but they're not what make the kind of people who grow up to be world changers. Not necessarily in the Nobel Prize way, but they might change a company or they might change a nonprofit organization. So interest is, to me, the heart of everything. The second thing that we've developed an instrument for is learning styles. I'm talking about the type of instructional situations that young people profit the most from. It might be, again, listening to lectures. It's not the most successful. It might be working in small groups. It might be through independent study. It might be through field trip experiences, for example. Seeing is believing. So one of the things that instrument does is give you a sense for how best to get through to that particular person. Assessment for learning, not assessment of learning. The third instrument, and one that's becoming more and more important to me all the time, is expression styles. And we've developed an instrument called My Way, after the Frank Sinatra song, I'll Do It My Way, how one likes to express themselves. If I find that a child likes to express themselves verbally, that opens a door for me for what are the different kinds of writing. There are probably at least 60 or 70 different genres. And the more we drill down to the one that a child really likes to do, then the more successful we will be in getting through to that child.
There's a big explosion of, kids with autism or, ADHD and so forth. Can they thrive under this sort of gifted model? For example, kind of the school here doesn't accept kids who are on the spectrum, for example. So I didn't know how that played into your particular style of learning.
Well, that's a very good question, because that has become very popular. We use the same pedagogy. The pedagogy in Renzulli Learning was built for all kids, including kids with disabilities. Are you familiar with the Bridges Academy in Los Angeles? Work with Susan Baum, one of my former doctoral students, by the way, and the world's leading authority, I might add, in twice exceptional children. She used basically the pedagogy, the learning stuff that I've been talking about here. They've got all kinds of kids in that, Asperger's and autism and everything in between. And, one of the things, I've been there many, many times, one of the things is they find out what a child's interest is. They find out what are the resources, the opportunities and the resources and the encouragement that allow the child to pursue that interest. They have a remarkable record of their kids going on to higher education.
Mm-hmm.
And so I believe that the worst thing we can probably do with kids is, one kid said to me one time when I was visiting his school, they find out what I can't do, what I won't do, what I don't like to do, and they spend the rest of the year beating me to death with it. So what they do at Bridges and other schools with Twice Exceptional, there are a number of them around the country that use our work, is they use the child's interest and strength areas to build basic skills rather than saying, first we must build their basic skills, then they might be able to go on and do something.
So how do parents test then? I mean, where can you direct them to go for some of the Interlizer and some of these other tools that you talked about?
Well, you can go to our website at the University of Connecticut. Well, Renzulli Learning, the university eventually sold it to a private company, so it's a proprietary item. It's very reasonable, and they're giving it away free during COVID. One of the things that you could do is go to my website, www.uconn.gifted.edu. Mm-hmm. Go to the section on school-wide enrichment. Mm-hmm. Go to the section on articles and presentations. There's some videos there that I've done over time and other people have done. Mm-hmm. And everything on the website is downloadable, reproducible, distributable in other countries, translatable, free. You don't have to write for permission. You don't have to pay for any fees. I believe that if this information has value, I don't want to lock it behind a $sign. I would like to be able to think that one of the things we can do most for the kinds of children that we serve in special programs is to teach them an orientation to use their gifts and talents, not to get rich. They get rich in the process. Right. That's good. But how to make the world a better place. And those are the people that history remembers. We remember the Rachel Carsons and people like that mm-hmm. work their tail off to save the planet.
I really appreciate all this insight in your work and to be able to talk to you directly. That was really great.
Nice work, Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. If you know someone who'd be a great fit for the show, come on over to ingeniousbaby.com and share your tips and story ideas. You are your baby's first and best teacher.